Okay, in this next part of the video, we will continue the review on section 3B, question 1, part B. Okay, so we will just continue where we left off from the previous video clip.
Now the next thing is that you have to evaluate how this story actually applies in the Singaporean context. Okay, and now this is a very important evaluation for fiscal policy that we have not really talked about a lot in tutorials, right? Okay, that's the size of the multiplier. Now you need to consider, okay, the size of the multiplier as an evaluation is especially important in the Singaporean context. Okay, for one very simple reason, you need to consider the characteristics of the Singaporean economy. Okay, we have a high marginal propensity to save. Okay, I hope you still remember what is marginal propensity to save. If not, please go back to your lecture booklet and search out what it is. Okay, this is due to the CPF scheme, which is basically some kind of enforced savings on our workers. And we also have in Singapore a very high marginal propensity to import. Okay, reason being, we actually don't produce a lot of consumer goods that we use every day. And even if we are producing certain goods, we are actually importing the raw materials. Now, if you recall, things like savings and imports, they are actually withdrawals to our circular flow of income. I hope you still remember it. Again, circular flow of income, if you have forgotten it, please go back to your lecture booklet and make some revisions and do some revisions. Okay, again, recall the multiplier. Okay, the value of the multiplier is 1 over the marginal propensity to withdraw, which is equals to 1 over the sum of MPS, MPT, and MPM. Okay, so in Singapore, MPS is going to be quite large, MPM is going to be quite large, and what we have essentially is that the multiplier is going to be very small. Okay, now how do you show this in a diagram? Basically, the only way to show the multiplier effect is through the Keynesian 45-degree diagram. So this is the second diagram that you might want to draw here. Okay, so let's just recap the Keynesian 45-degree diagram. The original case is that the original in the economy, there is AE 0, which corresponds to, in this case, I'm trying to use increase in government spending. Okay, so G0. Okay, this is more straightforward. So when there is an increase in G as per expansionary fiscal policy, what happens is that G increases from G0 to G1, and therefore your AE increases from AE0 to AE1. Okay, now recall the intersection between aggregate expenditure and the 45-degree line actually gives you your equilibrium, which means actually that you only have a very small increase in national income, okay, with an increase in G. Alright, so basically what I'm trying to say is that in the Singaporean context, for fiscal policy to be effective in Singapore, the government needs to make a very large injection or a very large increase in G to have a noticeable impact on real national income and a noticeable impact on cyclical unemployment. Okay, so this is the reason why we say that fiscal policy is not so effective in the Singaporean context, because for it to be effective, G needs to be very, very large, and it is difficult for any government or to implement such a large increase in G. Okay, so again, the other effectiveness is basically time lag, which by now it should be very familiar, so I'll just skip through it quickly. Time lag is another way to evaluate effectiveness of fiscal policy. Now we have said that fiscal policy is not effective, so we want to present alternative policies that would be more effective in dealing with cyclical unemployment in Singapore. Okay, so for you to discuss intelligently about the alternative policies, first you need to consider the structure of the Singaporean economy. Okay, and you should know okay, if you don't know, you know now that the foreign trade sector in the Singaporean economy is actually many times larger than our domestic economy itself. So what I'm trying to say is that we are actually exporting and importing a lot more goods than what our domestic economy actually uses. Okay, so a lot of what we produce is actually going overseas. Okay, which means that if you look at the AD components, right, C, I, G, X minus M, basically X minus M is the largest component in AD. Okay, so if we want to increase AD, we should not be targeting G. Instead, we should be targeting X minus M. Okay, and so what policy tools actually target X minus M, right? And that's the exchange rate policy. Okay, so just ignore the P0 here, it's a mistake. So exchange rate policy, basically what we want to do is to allow SGD or the Singaporean or the Sing dollar to depreciate by selling Sing dollars in the international forex market. Okay, so why do we want? Okay, so it's a good, now again it's a good time to present a diagram. Okay, so this is the original equilibrium here. The original price of your domestic currency, in this case the Sing dollar, is at P0. What you want to do is for the government to sell Sing dollars in the international forex market, and that increases the supply of Sing dollars, okay, in the international forex market. So what we see here is that the price of Sing dollar actually falls. Okay, that is what we mean by allowing the Sing dollar to depreciate. Okay, so the price has become lower, Sing dollar has depreciated. Okay, the main effect here is that exports become cheaper. So the quantity that you export actually increases, and therefore your export revenue increases and your AD increases. Okay, and this sets off the chain of effect. So when your AD increases, your real national income increase and cyclical unemployment actually falls. Okay, so diagram wise, refer back to figure 1, which is the same ADAS diagram, okay, for fiscal policy. So the diagrams are the same, don't need to draw again. Okay, so now how do we evaluate exchange rate policy? Basically, you need the price elasticity of exports to be elastic. Okay, so that your export revenue will actually increase when you lower prices, right? Now, the next thing that we should do is to talk about alternative policies that deal with structural and frictional unemployment. Now, recall right at the start in your intro, you actually say that there are 3 types of unemployment in Singapore, right? So the exchange rate policy already dealt with the cyclical part. So now we need to have other policies to deal with the structural and frictional unemployment. And these generally are the supply side policies. Okay, so I've mentioned this point. Like I said, fiscal policy and exchange rate policy are demand side policies that only address cyclical unemployment, and you need to bring in supply side policies to deal with structural and frictional unemployment. Okay, now let us take a look at structural unemployment first. So what are the usual solutions to structural unemployment? Okay, very simple, retraining. Now remember, structural unemployment, we say that there is a skills mismatch between the workers' skills and the skills that are demanded by the economy. So how do you overcome this skills mismatch? Basically, you have retraining initiatives. Okay, you retrain the workers. Okay, you can also give firms incentives to get them to retrain the workers. Okay, so not just the government-led initiatives to retrain workers, but you also give the firms extra benefit for them to retrain their workers. Okay. Now for frictional unemployment, very simple. Basically, like I said, frictional unemployment is people taking a long time to find the jobs that they want, right? So what do? You help to match up the unemployed people to the potential employers. Okay. How do you match them up? Basically things like job fairs, and job fairs in easily accessible locations like community centers, and also having employment agencies to sort of collect information on potential employers and employees. Okay. So now let us just conclude the essay. What do we have to say? Okay, so let us just conclude. What are some of the things that we might want to talk about in the conclusion is that we need to have a variety of policies to solve the problem of unemployment. Okay, as you can see, the problem of unemployment can be quite complicated with the different types of unemployment at play at the same time. So we need to have a variety of policies to solve the problem. Okay, and let's acknowledge this. Okay, although we said that fiscal policy is not effective, we have seen examples of fiscal policy at work in Singapore. Okay, the best example in the recent years is the building of MRT lines. Okay, so even though it may not be the most effective, we still use fiscal policy occasionally. Okay, but most of the time it is the exchange rate policy that is used because it is more effective in Singapore. And we also actively use supply side policies to deal with structural and frictional unemployment. Okay.
Okay, so let us just do a quick recap of this question. So in the intro, we brought in the different types of unemployment in Singapore. The three main types of unemployment: cyclical, structural, and frictional. We also discussed how US solved its unemployment problem, and that is fiscal policy. And we also defined fiscal policy and also gave an overview of the answer that we will be writing. Okay. In the body itself, we gave a theoretical discussion about how fiscal policy may be effective in reducing cyclical unemployment. Okay. This is your classic ADAS diagram, which shows a rightward shift of AD due to the increase in G or the reduction in taxes. Okay. Next thing, we bring it to Singapore's context and we evaluated the effectiveness of fiscal policy. This is where we brought in the size of the multiplier, and we said that the multiplier in Singapore is really quite small. Okay, because of the nature of our economy, where there is a large proportion of savings and imports. Okay, in the next part of the body, we actually brought in alternative policies that are more effective than fiscal policy in addressing the cyclical unemployment in Singapore. So this is your exchange rate policy. Okay. Lastly, we talked about alternative policies that deal with structural and frictional unemployment. Okay. This is to remind ourselves that policies like fiscal policy and exchange rate policy, they only deal with cyclical unemployment, and other types of unemployment like structural and frictional is actually left out. Okay, and finally, in the conclusion, what we did was to acknowledge that fiscal policy is still used occasionally in Singapore, but it is just part of a combination of policies. Okay, it is not the main policy, but rather part of the combination of policies focusing on both demand side and supply side policies. Okay.
So by and large, that is the review for question 1B in section 3B. That took a lot of time because it's a part B question, the more difficult one. So for the next part of the video tutorials, we will actually go through section 3C, question 1, part A. Okay, thank you very much.